Hey guys, tonight we're breaking into Cleopatra's palace, not to steal her crown, but to sniff out a secret so intoxicating that Rome itself would go mad trying to copy it. Imagine this: you're tiptoeing down a marble hallway, torchlight flickering, and suddenly you catch a scent so hypnotic, it stops you cold. What was in that perfume? Why did the world's most powerful empires obsess over a single drop? In a couple of minutes, you'll find out how Cleopatra's midnight experiments created a fragrance so legendary, its recipe became one of history's most sought-after mysteries. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Rome, with all its gold and ambition, couldn't bottle the magic of Egypt's queen. Here's a wild fact to get you started. Cleopatra's perfume wasn't just for smelling nice. It was so potent, ancient writers claimed you could follow her scented barge for miles down the Nile. But here's the twist. Despite all their spies and scientists, the Romans never managed to recreate her signature scent. Historians still argue whether the recipe was truly lost, or if Cleopatra herself sabotaged every attempt to copy it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from, whether you're in rainy Manchester or somewhere the Nile would envy. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press your hand against cool, ancient stone, heart thumping as you slip through a side door guarded by a statue of Batet, the cat goddess. Alexandria's palace at midnight is a different world, silent except for the distant lap of water and the faintest trace of music drifting from somewhere deep inside. You're not here for gold or jewels. You're hunting something rarer, the secret behind Cleopatra's Lotus Perfume, a scent so powerful it could sway hearts, seal alliances, and spark envy across continents. The corridors are lined with painted lotus blossoms, their blue petals almost glowing in the torchlight. You pass a servant carrying a tray of tiny glass bottles, each sealed with wax and stamped with the royal cobra. The air is thick with anticipation, and if your nose isn't lying, a swirl of honey, myrrh, and something green and watery, like the Nile after a rainstorm. You pause. Is it your imagination, or did that shadow just move? No, just a curtain fluttering in the breeze. You keep going, drawn by the promise of a secret that's eluded everyone from Roman spies to modern scientists. You duck into a low-ceilinged chamber, and there she is, Cleopatra herself, draped in linen, her hair braided with gold wire, standing over a bubbling bronze cauldron. She's surrounded by scrolls, bowls of crushed petals, and a pile of what looks suspiciously like crocodile dung. Ancient Egyptians used it for everything from medicine to, yes, sunscreen. Don't try this at home. The queen glances up, her eyes sharp and amused, as if she's been expecting you all along. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, she says, her voice as smooth as the oil she stirs into her potion. But sometimes, it's the only way to learn. The room is warm, the air heavy with the scent of blue lotus, a flower prized not just for its beauty, but for its rumored powers to relax the mind and, well, inspire a little romance. You watch as Cleopatra adds a pinch of cinnamon, a splash of wine, and a few drops of something so rare, she keeps it locked in a tiny alabaster jar. You realize this isn't just a casual evening hobby. Cleopatra's perfume lab is a fortress of secrets, guarded by loyalty, superstition, and a healthy dose of intimidation. The queen's personal perfumer hovers nearby, eyes darting between you and the bubbling cauldron, as if daring you to guess the next ingredient. The shelves are stacked with jars of frankincense, bundles of dried herbs, and mysterious powders labeled in a script you can't quite decipher. There's even a bowl of what looks like mashed dates. Apparently, ancient Egyptians believed a little sweetness could help a scent linger longer on the skin. You're tempted to reach out and touch, but a single raised eyebrow from Cleopatra stops you cold. Mainstream fact: the ancient Egyptians were masters of perfumery, inventing techniques and recipes that would influence the world for millennia. Cleopatra, ever the innovator, took these traditions to new heights, blending science, art, and a healthy dose of showmanship. Quirky tidbit? Some legends claim she even soaked the sails of her royal barge in perfume, so that the wind itself would announce her arrival long before she appeared. But here's where the debate heats up. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's perfume was truly unique, or if its magic lay in the queen's ability to turn even the simplest scent into a symbol of power. Was it the ingredients, the ritual, or just pure Cleopatra charisma? Tonight you're about to find out. You lean in, the queen's perfume swirling around you, and realize you're standing at the edge of a mystery that's outlasted empires. The recipe is almost within reach, but as you'll see, nothing in Cleopatra's world is ever that simple. The queen's eyes linger on you, as if weighing your intentions, and you can't help but wonder, if you do learn her secret, will you ever be allowed to leave this chamber? You probably won't survive this if you try to outsmart Cleopatra herself, but hey, at least you'll smell amazing. You take a deep breath, letting the aroma settle into your memory. Somewhere in this room, hidden among the scrolls and spices, is the answer to a riddle that's haunted perfumers and historians for centuries. The night is young, the palace is quiet, and your adventure is just beginning. Ready to follow the scent? You slip from Cleopatra's secret chamber and step out into the moonlit gardens of Alexandria, your senses still tingling with the queen's intoxicating brew. The air is thick with the perfume of night-blooming flowers, but one scent stands out above all, the unmistakable, almost otherworldly aroma of the blue lotus. You follow your nose down a winding path, past marble fountains and whispering palms, until you reach the edge of a lily-choked pond. Here, the lotus reigns supreme, its petals unfurling like tiny sails, shimmering with dew, and glowing faintly in the silvery light. You crouch by the water's edge, careful not to slip and make a splash that would wake the palace guards. You reach out and pluck a single blue lotus, its stem cool and slick in your hand. The scent is both sweet and strangely spicy, with a hint of something that makes your eyelids feel heavy, as if sleep itself were hiding in the petals. For a moment you wonder if you're imagining things, but then you remember, this isn't just any flower. The blue lotus was the ancient world's botanical superstar, worshipped, traded, and some say, used as a mild sedative and aphrodisiac. You hold it up to your nose and inhale deeply, feeling a gentle wave of calm wash over you. No wonder Cleopatra made it the heart of her signature fragrance. Mainstream historical fact: the blue lotus, or Nymphea caerulea, was sacred to the ancient Egyptians. It appears everywhere in their art, from temple carvings to the painted walls of tombs, always associated with rebirth, pleasure, and the promise of a new day. It was more than just a pretty face in the garden. It was a symbol of divine beauty and power. Pharaohs and priests offered it to the gods, and ordinary people drank it steeped in wine at feasts, hoping for a taste of the god's favor. You twirl the blossom in your fingers, wondering what it would have been like to attend one of those legendary Nile banquets. Picture it, the riverbank lit by torches, the air swirling with laughter, music, and the heady scent of lotus floating on the breeze. You'd probably be sitting next to a scribe who's already had too much lotus wine and is reciting poetry about the goddess Hathor's hair. Someone else would be trying to impress their date by balancing a lotus flower on their nose. Ancient Egyptian party tricks, folks. They're not just for TikTok. But there's a deeper magic here, too. The blue lotus wasn't just for decoration or drunken revelry. Some ancient texts hint at its use in rituals, both sacred and secretive. Priests would crush the petals and mix them with oils, creating unguents for anointing statues and pharaohs alike. There are even whispers that the flower's subtle psychoactive effects played a role in temple ceremonies, helping worshippers slip into trance states or vivid dreams. Historians still argue whether the blue lotus really had mind-altering powers, or if its reputation grew with the telling, like a fish story that gets bigger every time it's told. You lean closer to the pond, watching the moon ripple across the water. A frog croaks nearby, and for a second you feel as if you're part of some ancient midnight ritual. The lotus, you realize, is more than just a perfume ingredient. It's a passport to another world, a bridge between the mundane and the magical. Cleopatra understood this. She didn't just want to smell good. She wanted to evoke the mysteries of the Nile, to wrap herself in the symbols of rebirth and seduction that the lotus represented. You tuck the flower behind your ear and stand, feeling a little bolder, a little more regal. Maybe it's the lotus talking, or maybe it's just the thrill of the adventure, but you can almost hear Cleopatra's laughter echoing through the garden. She knew how to use every tool at her disposal: flowers, scents, even the stories people whispered about her, to shape her legend. And tonight you're starting to see how the blue lotus became her most powerful ally. As you wander back toward the palace, you notice something odd: a pair of Roman sandals abandoned near the pond, their owner nowhere in sight. You smirk. Even the Romans, with all their discipline and dignity, couldn't resist the lure of the lotus. Maybe they thought they could sneak a few flowers back to Rome, hoping to unlock the secret of Cleopatra's perfume. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The blue lotus refused to give up its secrets to outsiders, no matter how hard they tried. Quirky tidbit: some modern herbalists claim that blue lotus tea can still induce mild euphoria or vivid dreams, though science is, let's say, politely skeptical. If you're tempted to try it, remember, Cleopatra's recipe is still missing a few ingredients, and you're not a pharaoh, unless you have a pyramid in your backyard, in which case, flex away. You slip the lotus into your pocket, the scent lingering on your fingers. The palace looms ahead, its windows glowing with candlelight. Somewhere inside, Cleopatra is waiting, her perfume swirling in the air, daring you to discover what makes her fragrance so irresistible. You're starting to understand why the world was obsessed with this flower. But there's so much more to learn. Historians still debate whether the blue lotus was the true source of Cleopatra's power, or just one dazzling note in a much more complex symphony of scent. Was it the flower, the ritual, or the queen herself who cast the spell? You're about to find out, if you can make it past the next set of guards without tripping over your own feet. You take one last look at the pond, the lotus blossoms nodding in the breeze, and head back toward the heart of the palace. The night is young, and the secrets of Cleopatra's perfume are just beginning to unfold. You slip quietly through a side entrance, the blue lotus still perfuming your fingertips, and find yourself in the bustling heart of Alexandria's palace, a place that smells like 1,000 years of secrets and celebrations. The corridors here are alive with the shuffle of sandals and the low murmur of voices, but it's the scents that truly tell the story: sweet resins, smoky incense, and the ever-present undertone of crushed herbs. You realize that in Egypt, perfume isn't just a luxury, it's woven into the very fabric of daily life, as essential as bread or sunlight. You pass a group of servants preparing for the morning's rituals, their arms dusted with fragrant powders. One is delicately rubbing scented oil into a carved wooden statue of Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood. Another is arranging garlands of flowers for the temple altar. You catch a whiff of frankincense, sharp, citrusy, and almost electrifying, mingling with the earthy sweetness of myrrh. It's a scent that lingers long after the ceremony ends, clinging to your clothes and your memory. Mainstream historical fact: in ancient Egypt, perfume was so important that even the poorest citizens would save up for a tiny vial of scented oil. The wealthy, of course, went all out, bathing in perfumed water, anointing their bodies with exotic blends, and filling their tombs with jars of fragrance for the afterlife. The famous kifi, a complex incense made from honey, wine, raisins, and over a dozen spices, was burned in temples every night to please the gods and purify the air. You wonder if Cleopatra's own recipe was inspired by this legendary concoction, or if she saw it as a rival to be outdone. You wander through the palace kitchens, where a team of perfumers is hard at work. Bronze mortars clatter as petals and spices are ground to paste. A young apprentice fans a charcoal brazier, coaxing out the essence of cinnamon and cardamom. The head perfumer, a stern woman with a nose that could probably sniff out a lie at 50 paces, measures drops of oil with the precision of a mathematician. She glances up, catches you watching, and winks. "The secret," she says, "is patience. And never letting the Romans see your recipe book." You stifle a laugh, but she's not wrong. The Egyptians guarded their perfume formulas like state secrets, passing them down through families and guilds. Some recipes were even inscribed on papyrus scrolls and locked away in temple archives, accessible only to the initiated. Quirky tidbit: it's rumored that some priests would sprinkle their scrolls with a special scent, so that if a thief tried to steal one, the smell would give them away. Ancient security system, anyone? You pause by a window overlooking the city. The sun is rising, turning the Nile into a ribbon of gold. Below, the marketplace is coming alive, vendors setting out baskets of flowers, merchants hawking tiny bottles of perfume, and children chasing each other through clouds of scented smoke. You can almost hear the haggling. "This is the finest lotus oil in Alexandria. Guaranteed to make you irresistible, or your money back." Okay, maybe not in those exact words, but you get the idea. Historians still argue whether the perfumes of ancient Egypt were truly as complex as the legends claim, or if nostalgia has sweetened the memory. Some surviving recipes are surprisingly simple, just a handful of ingredients, mixed with oil and left to steep in the sun. Others read like a wizard's shopping list: rare spices from India, resin from Arabia, and flowers that only bloom for a single night each year. You can see why Cleopatra's own blend became the stuff of myth. She had access to the best ingredients, the best minds, and a flair for the dramatic that put every other perfumer to shame. You duck into a tiny shop tucked between two pillars, its shelves crowded with jars and amphorae. The shopkeeper, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, offers you a sniff of his latest creation, a blend of rose, mint, and something he calls the breath of the Nile. You're not sure what that means, but it smells surprisingly fresh, like river water and wildflowers after a storm. He grins. Everyone wants to smell like Cleopatra these days. Even the Romans. Especially the Romans. You thank him and move on, the scent clinging to your sleeve. It's clear that perfume in Egypt isn't just about smelling nice. It's about identity, status, even immortality. The right fragrance can turn a commoner into a queen, or a queen into a legend. And as you make your way back toward the palace, you realize that every drop of Cleopatra's perfume carries a piece of this world with it. The river, the sun, the endless fields of flowers, and the dreams of a people who believed that scent could bridge the gap between mortal and divine. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Egyptians believed that a person's soul could recognize its own body in the afterlife by the unique scent of the perfumes buried with them. No pressure, right? Just make sure you pick a fragrance you really like. You return to Cleopatra's private quarters, your mind spinning with the possibilities. Was her legendary perfume a simple blend, or a masterpiece of complexity? Did she invent it herself, or inherit it from generations of royal perfumers? Historians still debate the origins of her secret recipe, but one thing is clear: in Egypt, perfume was more than a luxury. It was a language, a way to speak to the gods, to lovers, and to history itself. You pause outside the queen's door, the blue lotus tucked safely in your pocket, and take a deep breath. The next step is clear. To truly understand Cleopatra's perfume, you'll have to see how she used it, not just in private, but on the grand stage of politics and power. You slip through a tapestry-draped archway and into Cleopatra's audience hall, where the queen is already at work weaving her next spell, this time, not with potions or poetry, but with the invisible power of scent. The room is a theater of diplomacy tonight, marble pillars wrapped in garlands, oil lamps flickering, and a dozen foreign dignitaries shifting in their seats, each one hoping to catch a whiff of something they can't quite name. You take your place in the shadows, watching the queen glide across the polished floor, every movement calculated, every detail, down to the fragrance trailing in her wake, meticulously chosen. You notice how even the air seems to bend around her. As Cleopatra approaches a Roman envoy, the man straightens, eyes wide, nostrils flaring like a horse catching the scent of spring. The queen leans in, her perfume subtle but unmistakable, a cloud of lotus, honey, and something darker, more mysterious. The envoy stammers through his greeting, clearly thrown off his game. You smirk. Cleopatra's perfume isn't just a beauty trick, it's a weapon, as sharp as any dagger. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra was a master of political theater. She famously met Julius Caesar rolled up in a carpet, and later, when she first met Mark Antony, she arrived on a gilded barge with perfumed sails, dressed as the goddess Isis. Ancient writers like Plutarch described how the scent of her arrival would reach the shore before her ship was even visible, driving crowds wild with anticipation. It's no wonder Rome was obsessed, not just with the woman, but with the mystery of her fragrance. You drift closer, blending in with a group of servants fanning the guests. The air is thick with tension and the competing scents of imported oils. You catch snippets of conversation, envoys trading rumors about the ingredients in Cleopatra's perfume, some claiming it's made with rare resins from Punt, others whispering about secret rituals under the new moon. One Roman, clearly out of his depth, mutters that the queen must have bewitched the entire city. You try not to laugh. If only he knew how close he was to the truth. Quirky tidbit: in Egypt, perfume was sometimes used as a form of currency. Cleopatra is said to have wagered a fortune on a bet with Mark Antony, dissolving a priceless pearl in vinegar and drinking it, just to prove she could. Historians still argue whether this was a true display of extravagance, or a clever bit of stagecraft designed to leave her rivals speechless. You watch as Cleopatra signals for her favorite handmaiden, who brings over a small alabaster jar. The queen dips her fingers in, dabbing a bit of oil behind her ears and at her wrists. Instantly, the mood in the room shifts. The Roman envoy leans in, his voice softening, his posture relaxing. Cleopatra smiles, knowing she has him right where she wants him. The perfume isn't just a scent, it's a message. "You're in my world now," it says. "And here, I make the rules." Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's legendary allure was due to her intelligence, her beauty, or the sheer power of her presence. Some say her perfume was the secret weapon that tipped the scales, while others insist it was simply the finishing touch on a masterpiece of charisma. What's certain is that the queen understood the psychology of scent long before modern science caught up. She knew how a fragrance could evoke memories, stir emotions, and even change the outcome of a negotiation. You slip out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air, the queen's perfume still clinging to your clothes. Below, the city stretches out in a patchwork of rooftops and lanterns, the Nile winding through it all like a ribbon of silver. You imagine the stories that will be told tomorrow, of the Roman envoy who left the palace dazed and dazzled, of the queen who could charm an empire with a single drop of oil. Quirky tidbit: some ancient texts claim that Cleopatra's perfume was so strong, it could be detected on her clothes for weeks after she wore it. Others say she had her servants sprinkle scented water on the palace floors so that every step she took left a trail of fragrance. Whether these tales are fact or fiction, they all point to one truth: Cleopatra knew how to make an entrance and an impression. You return to the hall as the evening winds down, the guests departing in a swirl of silk and speculation. Cleopatra lingers by a window, watching the city below. You wonder what she's thinking, about Rome, about her own legend, about the power she wields with every scented breath. As you slip away, you realize you're not just chasing a recipe tonight. You're chasing a legacy, one that's as elusive and intoxicating as the queen's own perfume. Historians still argue whether the real magic was in the bottle, or in the woman who wielded it. Maybe you think it's a little of both. And as you make your way back through the palace, the scent of lotus and honey trailing behind you, you can't help but feel you've just witnessed a master class in the art of power and persuasion, Cleopatra style. You wander deeper into the palace, past columns painted with lotus and papyrus, until you reach a storeroom that smells like 1,000 gardens pressed into one. This is where the magic begins, the ingredients. Cleopatra's perfume wasn't just a single note, it was a symphony, each element chosen for its power, its rarity, or its story. You duck beneath a beaded curtain and find yourself surrounded by shelves stacked high with amphorae, jars, and baskets overflowing with treasures from every corner of the known world. You run your fingers over a jar labeled myrrh, the resin inside sticky and sweet, with a smoky undertone that makes you think of ancient temples. Next to it sits frankincense, pale and crumbly, its scent sharp and citrusy when you crack a piece between your nails. There's cinnamon bark from the far-off land of Punt, its spicy aroma curling through the air, and cardamom pods, tiny but bursting with warmth. You spot a bowl of dried rose petals, their color faded but their fragrance still clinging stubbornly to the ears. Mainstream historical fact: the Egyptians were obsessed with sourcing the finest ingredients for their perfumes. Trade caravans would travel for weeks, sometimes months, across deserts and seas to bring back rare spices, resins, and flowers. Cleopatra, with her royal connections and bottomless curiosity, had access to the very best. Some scholars even say her agents scoured the markets of Arabia, India, and beyond for anything that might give her an edge. But it's the blue lotus that draws your eye again, piled high in a woven basket, its petals still faintly damp from the Nile. You remember the way it made your head swim earlier, and you wonder how much of its magic comes from the flower itself, and how much from the stories people tell about it. You pick up a petal and crush it between your fingers, releasing a scent that's both familiar and impossible to pin down, sweet, green, and just a little bit wild. Quirky tidbit: some ancient recipes called for ingredients that would make even the bravest perfumer pause. Bits of civet, from a cat-like animal, musk from deer, and even the occasional dash of crocodile dung, yes, again, found their way into certain blends. The idea was to create a scent so unique, so unforgettable, that it would linger long after the wearer had left the room. You can't help but wonder if Cleopatra ever dared her perfumers to push the boundaries, just to see what would happen. You spot a small, locked chest in the corner, its lid carved with the royal cartouche. You can't resist. With a glance over your shoulder, you lift the lid and find a handful of tiny alabaster jars, each one sealed with wax and marked with a different symbol. You open one and are hit with a wave of something so rich and complex it almost knocks you backward. It's like breathing in a summer night, floral, spicy, and smoky all at once. You realize you're holding the heart of Cleopatra's secret, an ingredient so rare, its name has been lost to time. Historians still argue about what exactly went into the Queen's legendary blend. Some say it was a closely guarded temple recipe, passed down through generations of priestesses. Others believe Cleopatra herself was the mastermind, experimenting late into the night with new combinations, never satisfied with anything less than perfection. There's even a theory that she added a drop of her own blood to each batch, binding her essence to the scent. Is it true? No one can say for sure. But the mystery only adds to the allure. You close the chest and return to the shelves, your mind spinning with possibilities. You spot a jar of spikenard, an herb with a musky, earthy scent that was prized in both Egypt and Rome. Next to it, a bundle of mint leaves, their sharpness cutting through the heavier aromas like a cool breeze. There's even a small bag of saffron threads, each one worth its weight in gold, glowing like tiny embers in the lamplight. You realize that Cleopatra's perfume wasn't just about smelling good. It was about telling a story of power, seduction, and the ability to command attention in any room. Each ingredient played its part, chosen not just for its fragrance, but for what it represented: wealth, mystery, danger, or the promise of something forbidden. You wonder if the Romans ever understood that, or if they were too busy trying to reverse engineer the scent to notice the symbolism woven into every drop. Quirky tidbit: some ancient perfumers believed that the right combination of scents could actually change a person's fate, attracting luck, love, or even divine favor. Imagine bottling your own destiny, one drop at a time. Cleopatra certainly did. You gather a handful of ingredients: lotus, myrrh, cinnamon, and a pinch of something you can't quite identify, and tuck them into a pouch at your waist. As you leave the storeroom, you catch a glimpse of a faded recipe scratched onto a tablet. The writing is cryptic, the measurements imprecise, and you realize that even if you had all the right ingredients, recreating Cleopatra's perfume would be like trying to paint the sunset with only half the colors. Historians still debate whether anyone, even the queen herself, could ever make the exact same blend twice. Maybe that's the real secret. Cleopatra's perfume was as much about the moment as the mixture. A fleeting magic, impossible to bottle, but unforgettable once experienced. You slip back into the palace corridors, your pouch heavy with treasures and your mind buzzing with questions. The next step? Watching how these rare ingredients are transformed into the elixir that would haunt Rome's dreams for centuries. You follow the scent trail through the palace, your pouch of rare ingredients bouncing gently at your side, until you reach a heavy wooden door tucked behind a tapestry of Osiris. You slip inside and are immediately greeted by a wave of heat and the soft, rhythmic clatter of mortars and pestles. This is the heart of Cleopatra's alchemical world, the perfume kitchen, where science and sorcery blend into something almost supernatural. The air is thick with the aroma of simmering oils, sweet resins, and the faintest hint of something sharp and medicinal. You blink as your eyes adjust to the flickering torchlight, and realize you've entered a place where time itself seems to slow, every movement deliberate and steeped in ritual. Bronze cauldrons bubble on low fires, each one tended by a servant or apprentice. Some are grinding petals into paste, their hands stained purple and gold. Others stir mixtures with long wooden spoons, muttering prayers to Batet or Thoth as they work. You watch as a young girl carefully measures drops of lotus oil into a bowl, her brow furrowed in concentration. The head perfumer, a woman with silver hair and the posture of a queen herself, oversees the chaos with a single raised eyebrow, her eyes missing nothing. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptian perfumers were true chemists, their methods centuries ahead of their time. They invented techniques like enfleurage, soaking petals in fat to extract their scent, and maceration, where botanicals were left to steep in oil for weeks or even months. Their workshops were part laboratory, part temple, and part gossip hub, where secrets were traded as eagerly as recipes. Cleopatra's own perfume lab would have been the envy of the ancient world, stocked with tools and ingredients from every corner of her empire. You edge closer to the main worktable, where the queen herself is presiding over the final stage of her latest batch. She gestures for you to come forward, and you can't help but feel a little thrill of terror. After all, you're about to witness a process that Rome's best spies never got close to. Cleopatra's hands move with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what she wants. She adds a pinch of ground cinnamon, a splash of wine, and a few drops of blue lotus oil to a thick, golden base. The mixture hisses and steams, releasing a fragrance so rich and layered you almost forget to breathe. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient recipes called for ingredients to be blessed under a full moon or stirred only with a branch from a sacred tree. Others insisted on silence during the mixing, lest a careless word spoil the batch. Cleopatra, ever the innovator, is rumored to have added her own twists, perhaps a secret chant, or a drop of something only she knew how to prepare. Historians still argue whether these rituals were superstition, science, or a little bit of both. You watch as the perfumers strain the mixture through fine linen, collecting the precious oil in tiny alabaster jars. The process is painstaking, each drop filtered, tested, and carefully sealed away. The head perfumer sniffs a sample, nods approvingly, and marks the jar with the royal seal. You realize that every step is part of a larger dance, a choreography of scent and secrecy designed to keep outsiders guessing. No wonder Rome could never quite crack the code. The queen turns to you, her eyes glinting with mischief. "It's not enough to have the right ingredients," she says, "or even the right hands. You must have the right moment, the right intention." She dips her finger into the finished oil and dabs a bit behind your ear. Instantly, the world seems softer, the colors brighter, the air itself charged with possibility. You almost laugh. If this is what Cleopatra wore into battle, it's no wonder she left generals and poets swooning in her wake. Historians still debate whether the true power of Cleopatra's perfume lay in the formula or the performance. Was it the scent itself that enchanted her lovers and rivals, or the spectacle of its creation, the midnight rituals, the whispered incantations, the sense that you were in the presence of something rare and magical? Some scholars argue that the queen's genius was in making every batch a one-of-a-kind event, impossible to copy because it was never exactly the same twice. You move to a quieter corner, watching as the last jars are sealed and labeled. The apprentices clean up, sweeping petals and ashes into a clay pot for tomorrow's batch. The head perfumer catches your eye and winks, as if to say, "Good luck remembering every step." You realize that even if you wrote down every ingredient, every measurement, you'd still be missing the heart of the recipe, the spirit that makes it more than just a list of oils and herbs. Quirky tidbit. Some say Cleopatra would test new perfumes by wearing them during important negotiations, gauging the reactions of her guests. If the scent made a Roman ambassador blush or a rival queen lean in a little closer, she'd know she was on to something special. If not, well, back to the cauldron. You leave the kitchen with a new appreciation for the art and science of scent. The perfume clings to your skin, a reminder that you've witnessed something extraordinary. As you step back into the palace corridors, you wonder how Cleopatra will use this latest batch, on the battlefield of romance, in the halls of power, or perhaps as a gift for someone who doesn't yet know they're about to fall under her spell. Historians still argue whether the queen's true genius was in her recipes, her rituals, or her relentless curiosity. One thing is certain, in this palace, perfume is never just perfume. It's a weapon, a shield, and a signature all at once. You move on, the scent swirling around you, ready to see how Cleopatra's elixir will work its magic on the world outside these fragrant walls. You leave the steamy kitchens behind, the scent of fresh lotus and spiced oils clinging to your skin like a secret you're not quite ready to share. The palace is quieter now, the corridors dim and echoing, but you can sense the anticipation building, Cleopatra is preparing for another of her legendary entrances. You slip into the shadows, eager to see how the queen transforms a simple fragrance into a force of nature, capable of toppling hearts and shifting the balance of power with nothing more than a scented breeze. You find a vantage point near the grand staircase, just as Cleopatra's attendants begin their ritual. They brush her hair with combs dipped in perfumed oil, weave fresh lotus blossoms into her braids, and dust her skin with a golden shimmer that catches the lamplight. The air is thick with excitement and the heady aroma of her signature blend, lotus, myrrh, cinnamon, and something mysterious that seems to dance just out of reach. You watch as the queen studies herself in a polished bronze mirror, her eyes calculating, her smile slow and knowing. She understands the game better than anyone. Before she says a word, her scent has already spoken. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra's use of perfume was legendary even in her own time. Plutarch wrote that when she sailed to meet Mark Antony, her ship's sails were soaked in precious oils, and the scent wafted down the river ahead of her, announcing her arrival long before she came into view. Perfume wasn't just an accessory, it was an announcement, a warning, and an invitation all at once. Tonight, the queen's destination is a banquet in the palace's grand hall. You follow at a respectful distance, watching as she glides past marble columns and fountains, her perfume trailing behind her like a comet's tail. The guests turn, drawn by the fragrance before they even realize they're looking for its source. Some smile, some whisper, and a few, those who know the stakes, look a little nervous. Cleopatra's scent is a promise and a challenge. Come closer, if you dare. You notice how she uses the perfume as a silent accomplice. At the banquet table, she leans in to speak with a visiting dignitary, her voice low and musical. The man's eyes widen as he inhales, his composure slipping just for a moment. Cleopatra smiles, knowing she's already won the first round. Later, she dances with Mark Antony, her perfume mingling with the smoke of incense and the sweetness of wine. The room seems to revolve around her, every conversation, every glance drawn into her orbit by the invisible thread of her scent. Quirky tidbit: some ancient love spells involved anointing the body with special oils or burning scented resins to attract a desired partner. Cleopatra, ever the innovator, took this to the next level. Her perfume was both a charm and a challenge, daring anyone who caught its scent to resist her allure. There are even stories that she had her personal quarters painted with layers of scented wax, so that the walls themselves would release fragrance as the temperature rose. Talk about setting the mood. You watch as the evening unfolds, the queen moving from guest to guest, her perfume working its subtle magic. Some tried to imitate her. One Roman noblewoman dabs at her neck with a clumsy blend of rose and olive oil, while another fans herself with a sprig of mint, hoping to mask her nerves. But it's no use. Cleopatra's scent is unique, unmistakable, and impossible to copy. It's as much a part of her legend as her wit or her beauty. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's true power lay in her appearance, her intellect, or her ability to manipulate the senses. Some argue that her perfume was a carefully crafted weapon, designed to disarm and distract her rivals. Others believe it was simply an extension of her personality, bold, complex, and unforgettable. What's certain is that she understood the psychology of scent long before modern science caught up. She knew that a single whiff could trigger memories, desires, and fears, all without a word being spoken. As the banquet winds down, you see Mark Antony lingering by Cleopatra's side, his expression equal parts admiration and awe. You can almost hear the whispers among the guests. What is that scent? How does she do it? You smile, knowing that the answer is as much about confidence and timing as it is about ingredients. Cleopatra's perfume is her signature, her shield, and her invitation to a world where nothing is quite as it seems. Quirky tidbit: some modern perfumers have tried to recreate Cleopatra's legendary scent, using ancient recipes and modern chemistry. The results? Mixed, to say the least. One reviewer described the recreated perfume as intoxicating, mysterious, and just a little bit dangerous, which, if you think about it, is probably exactly what Cleopatra would have wanted. You slip away as the guests begin to depart, the scent of lotus and spice lingering in the air. The palace is quiet again, but you know that for those who attended tonight's banquet, the memory of Cleopatra's perfume will haunt their dreams for weeks to come. You realize that in the Queen's hands, fragrance is never just about smelling good. It's about leaving a mark on the world, one scented breath at a time. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's perfume was truly unique, or if it was her charisma that made it legendary. Perhaps you think it's a little of both. And as you make your way back through the moonlit halls, the scent still clinging to your skin, you can't help but wonder what secrets the next day will bring. You wake to the sound of distant voices and the clatter of hooves on stone. Rome has come calling. The palace is abuzz with gossip, another Roman envoy, another round of gifts, and inevitably another failed attempt to steal the secrets of Egypt's most famous scent. You slip out into the city, blending with the crowd as you make your way toward Alexandria's busy port. The air here is different, salter, brisker, tinged with the sharp tang of ambition. Roman ships bob in the harbor, their prows carved with eagles and wolves, their decks stacked with amphorae and crates stamped Roma. You wander through the market, where perfumers hawk their wares to anyone with a denarius to spare. Lotus oil! True Egyptian! One shouts, waving a tiny vial under a Roman merchant's nose. The merchant sniffs, frowns, and shakes his head. Too sweet. Not like the Queen's. He moves on, leaving the perfumer muttering about foreigners who wouldn't know a good scent if it bit them. You can't help but grin. Rome may have conquered Egypt, but when it comes to perfume, they're still playing catch-up. Mainstream historical fact: the Romans were obsessed with Egyptian perfumes, importing vast quantities of oils, resins, and incense. Wealthy Romans would anoint themselves head to toe, scent their clothes, and even sprinkle perfume on their banquet tables. The most prized blends came from Egypt, and none was more coveted than Cleopatra's legendary lotus perfume. Roman historians wrote enviously about the queen's unrivaled scents, and emperors sent spies and scholars to learn her secrets. But much to their frustration, the real recipe always seemed just out of reach. You duck into a Roman perfumery, its shelves lined with glass bottles and ceramic jars. The owner, a plump man with olive skin and a gold chain, greets you in halting Greek. "Looking for something special?" he asks, eyes glinting. "I have the latest from Rome, rose, myrrh, even a little imported cinnamon. The ladies love it." He leans closer, lowering his voice. "But if you want the real Egyptian stuff, that'll cost you extra." He produces a tiny vial, sealed with wax and stamped with a scarab. You unstopper it and inhale. It's pleasant, floral, spicy, a little smoky, but it lacks the depth, the mystery, the magic of Cleopatra's blend. You nod politely and hand it back, leaving the merchant to chase after another hopeful customer. Quirky tidbit. The Romans tried everything to copy Egyptian perfumes, from hiring Egyptian perfumers to raiding temple stores for recipes. Some even believed that the secret ingredient was the Nile itself, and would import barrels of river water to mix with their oils, much to the confusion of Alexandria's water sellers, who suddenly found themselves in high demand. Historians still argue whether any of these efforts came close to the real thing, or if the Romans were simply outclassed by Egyptian know-how and a little bit of queenly misdirection. You stroll past a group of Roman ladies, their hair piled high and their wrists glittering with gold. They're clustered around a street vendor, each sniffing a different bottle and debating which scent will make them most irresistible at tonight's feast. One wrinkles her nose at a particularly pungent blend. "This smells like my husband's sandals after a long march," she declares, sending her friends into peals of laughter. You catch the vendor's eye. He shrugs as if to say, "What can you do? Roman noses." You pause at a stall selling incense cones, their tips dusted with gold. The vendor explains that these are inspired by the queen herself, meant to fill your home with the scent of lotus and honey. You buy one out of curiosity, light it, and watch the smoke curl into the air. The aroma is pleasant, but it's missing the complexity, the layers of spice, the undercurrent of something wild and untamable. You realize that, for all their wealth and ambition, the Romans are missing the heart of the recipe, the magic that comes from centuries of tradition, ritual, and a queen who understood the power of scent like no one else. Historians still debate whether the Romans ever truly appreciated the artistry of Egyptian perfumery, or if they were simply dazzled by the mystique of the East. Some argue that Roman perfumes became more elaborate and expensive in their quest to outdo Cleopatra, leading to a kind of olfactory arms race among the elite. Others believe that, despite their best efforts, the Romans never quite captured the soul of Egyptian scent, a blend of science, superstition, and sheer audacity. Quirky tidbit: Roman satirists loved to poke fun at perfume fads. One poet joked that you could always tell a Roman newly returned from Egypt by the trail of foreign stench he left in his wake. Another claimed that some perfumes were so strong they could raise the dead, or at least clear a crowded forum in seconds. As the sun sets, you return to the palace, the city alive with the sounds of feasting and celebration. You pass a Roman envoy, his robes perfumed with something expensive but oddly flat, like a painting with all the color washed out. He catches your eye and shrugs, as if to admit defeat. You smile, knowing that Cleopatra's secret is safe for another night. The Romans may have taken Egypt, but when it comes to perfume, the queen still reigns supreme. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's perfume was ever truly matched by Roman hands, or if the secret died with her. One thing is certain: the scent of the Nile, and the legend of its queen, linger long after the last Roman ship has sailed. You slip back into the palace, the incense cone still smoldering in your hand, and wonder what other secrets Cleopatra's perfumers have hidden away, waiting for the right nose, or the right moment, to be discovered. Back in the quiet of Cleopatra's palace, you find yourself drawn to a small, sunlit chamber where the queen's perfumers are hunched over their workbenches, surrounded by shards of clay jars and sticky, fragrant residue. The air here is thick with the ghosts of 100 different scents, some familiar, some so strange they make your head spin. You watch as a young apprentice carefully scrapes a dark, resinous crust from the inside of an ancient amphora, then dissolves it in a bath of oil, his hands steady but his eyes wide with awe. This is where the science of scent comes alive, and you realize just how far ahead of their time the Egyptians really were. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptian perfumers were pioneers in chemistry, inventing techniques that wouldn't be fully understood in the West for another 1,000 years. They mastered methods like distillation, enfleurage, and maceration, extracting the purest essence from flowers, resins, and spices. Their perfume recipes were so prized that some were inscribed on temple walls or sealed in tombs, meant to last for eternity. You marvel at the ingenuity. Amphorae designed to keep oil fresh for years, pestles carved from rare stones to avoid contaminating the blends, and even special, cold rooms, where delicate ingredients could be processed without losing their fragrance. You edge closer to a marble table where two perfumers are arguing in hushed voices. One insists that the secret to Cleopatra's lotus perfume lies in the precise temperature at which the lotus petals are steeped. Too hot, and the delicate aroma is lost. Too cold, and the scent never fully blooms. The other argues that it's all about timing. The petals must be harvested at dawn, when their oils are richest, and processed within the hour. You realize that every step, every decision, is a dance between art and science, a blend of intuition and experimentation that no Roman recipe book could ever hope to capture. Quirky tidbit: some ancient Egyptian perfumers were so protective of their formulas that they would deliberately leave out or alter one step in their written instructions, ensuring that only trusted apprentices could reproduce the real thing. It's the oldest trick in the book, literally. You glance at a papyrus scroll, its edges singed and stained, and wonder how many secrets are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right nose to sniff them out. Nearby, an older perfumer is examining a collection of ancient amphorae under a flickering lamp. He points out the residue clinging to the inside, thick, dark, and still faintly fragrant after centuries. This, he says, is the soul of the perfume. Even when the oil is gone, the memory remains. He chips off a tiny fragment and places it under a glass lens, inviting you to peer through. Up close, you see a rainbow of crystals, evidence of the complex chemistry at work. You're struck by the realization that Cleopatra's perfumers weren't just artists. They were scientists, centuries ahead of their time. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly understood the molecular science behind their creations, or if their success was the result of generations of trial and error, passed down like family secrets. Some modern researchers believe that the unique climate of Egypt, the heat, the dryness, the abundance of rare plants, gave their perfumes an edge that could never be replicated elsewhere. Others suggest that the real secret was the obsessive attention to detail, the willingness to experiment, and the refusal to settle for anything less than perfection. You watch as the apprentice pours the dissolved resin into a tiny alabaster jar, sealing it with wax and marking it with a symbol you don't recognize. The head perfumer inspects the jar, nods approvingly, and tucks it into a velvet-lined box alongside half a dozen others. Each jar is a time capsule, a snapshot of a moment in history, preserved in scent. You wonder how many of these treasures have been lost to time, and how many are still waiting to be rediscovered. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Egyptian perfumes were so potent that they were said to last for days, or even weeks, on the skin. One Roman writer complained that after hugging an Egyptian friend, he smelled like lotus oil for a month. You imagine Cleopatra's rivals grumbling as they tried, unsuccessfully, to wash away the queen's signature scent. You linger in the doorway, watching as the perfumers clean their tools and prepare for the next batch. The room is quiet now, the air heavy with the promise of secrets yet to be revealed. You realize that the science of scent is as much about memory as it is about chemistry, a way of capturing a moment, a feeling, a dream, and bottling it for eternity. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's perfume was the result of genius, luck, or a little bit of both. What's certain is that her legacy endures, not just in the stories and the ruins, but in every drop of oil, every whiff of lotus, every memory that lingers long after the scent has faded. You step back into the sunlight, the memory of the perfume kitchen clinging to your clothes. The city is alive with the sounds of life, vendors calling, children laughing, the distant hum of the Nile. You realize that the science of scent isn't just about what's in the bottle. It's about what's left behind, long after the last drop is gone. You wander through the palace gardens, the sun dipping low and painting the lotus ponds gold, and your mind starts to swirl with all the stories you've heard tonight, some whispered by servants, others carved into dusty temple walls. Cleopatra's perfume isn't just a recipe, it's a legend, tangled up in centuries of rumor, exaggeration, and outright fantasy. You pause beneath a fig tree, the air thick with the scent of ripening fruit, and try to untangle what's real from what's just a good story told over too much wine. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra's reputation for scented extravagance was so great that ancient writers, Plutarch, Dio, and others, couldn't resist embellishing. They described her perfume as a force of nature, wafting down the Nile, seducing emperors, and even driving crowds wild. Some claimed she could make a roomful of men swoon with a single drop. But here's the thing: the more famous the queen became, the wilder the stories grew. Over time, her perfume became a symbol of everything mysterious and alluring about Egypt itself. You sit on a stone bench and unroll a scroll you borrowed, from the palace library. It's covered in neat demotic script, but the story it tells is anything but tidy. According to this version, Cleopatra's perfume wasn't just for seduction or ceremony. It was a magical elixir, brewed during secret midnight rituals and blessed by the gods. The recipe, the scroll claims, was hidden in a labyrinth beneath the city, guarded by crocodiles and curses. You snort. It's a great story, but you're pretty sure the only thing guarding the recipe was a locked storeroom and a very grumpy head perfumer. Quirky tidbit: one persistent legend claims that Cleopatra's perfume contained a drop of venom from the asp, the very snake that would later end her life. Supposedly, this gave her scent a fatal allure, a touch of danger that no Roman could resist. Modern historians roll their eyes at this, but you have to admit, it's got a certain poetic flair. And hey, if you ever want to keep nosy neighbors away, just tell them your perfume is mildly venomous. You overhear two gardeners arguing about whether the blue lotus itself was magical. One insists it could make you fall in love instantly. Just one sniff and you're lost. The other claims it was all in the queen's head, that Cleopatra could have worn donkey's sweat and still had half of Rome at her feet. Historians still argue whether the Blue Lotus really had psychoactive effects, or if its reputation was just another layer of myth, built up over centuries of storytelling and wishful thinking. You stroll past a marble fountain, its water perfumed with rose petals and mint, and remember another story. That Cleopatra once challenged Mark Antony to a contest of luxury, dissolving a priceless pearl in vinegar and drinking it just to prove she could. Some say she did the same with her perfume, dousing herself in so much oil that the very walls of her palace dripped with scent. Did it really happen? Or was it just another tall tale, designed to dazzle and distract? You find yourself at the edge of the gardens, where a group of children are playing Queen and Romans. The Queen waves a stick like a scepter, commanding her subjects to bring her the most beautiful flower. One boy presents a wilted lotus, and that Queen sniffs it with exaggerated delight. You may approach, she declares, sending the others into fits of giggles. You smile, realizing that Cleopatra's legend lives on not just in scrolls and statues, but in the games children play and the stories people tell each other as the sun goes down. Quirky tidbit: in the Middle Ages, European alchemists became obsessed with finding Cleopatra's lost perfume recipe. Some claim to have found it, but their concoctions usually smelled more like a spice rack after a thunderstorm than anything fit for a queen. Still, the legend persisted, inspiring poets, painters, and even a few overly ambitious cooks. You lean back against the bench, the evening breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and mystery. You realize that the truth about Cleopatra's perfume is probably a mix of fact and fiction, a little science, a little showmanship, and a whole lot of clever storytelling. Historians still debate which stories are true and which are pure fantasy, but one thing is certain: the legend of Cleopatra's scent has outlasted empires, surviving in memory long after the last drop was gone. You watch the stars appear, one by one, and wonder how many other secrets are hidden in the night air, waiting for someone bold, or nosy, enough to chase them down. You tuck the scroll into your robe, the tales of Lotus and legends swirling in your mind, and head back toward the palace, ready to follow the scent wherever it leads next. You slip back into the palace as the night deepens, the corridors quieter now, the scent of lotus and spice lingering like a memory you can't quite shake. The revelry has faded, but a new tension hangs in the air, a sense that something precious is slipping away. You find yourself drawn to the royal archives, where a handful of scribes are hurriedly rolling up scrolls and sealing them with wax. There's talk of Roman soldiers marching on the city, of secrets that must be hidden before dawn. You realize you're witnessing the beginning of a vanishing act, the slow, deliberate disappearance of Cleopatra's most guarded treasure, her perfume recipe. You duck behind a marble column, heart pounding, as a pair of servants scurry past, arms laden with papyri and tiny alabaster jars. They whisper frantically, their voices barely more than a breath. Hide them in the temple vaults. No, the old well behind the garden. You catch only fragments, but it's clear that the Queen's most trusted allies are working through the night, desperate to keep her secrets from falling into Roman hands. Every footstep echoes with urgency. Every shadow seems to hold a hidden guardian. The palace, once a place of laughter and music, now feels like a fortress under siege, every corner thick with the anxiety of impending loss. Mainstream historical fact: after Cleopatra's death, Egypt fell under Roman rule, and much of the knowledge that had flourished under her reign was scattered or lost. The great libraries were plundered, temple priests were silenced, and the royal perfumers, those keepers of scent and secrecy, vanished into the shadows. Some were captured and forced to work for Roman masters, while others slipped away, taking their recipes and rituals with them. The most coveted formula of all, the recipe for Cleopatra's Lotus Perfume, simply disappeared from the record. You watch as a scribe tucks a slim papyrus into a hollow statue, then seals it with clay. Another buries a jar of rare oil beneath a loose floor tile, glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting a Roman centurion to burst in at any moment. It's a desperate, almost frantic effort to preserve what they can, but you sense that most of these secrets will never be found again. The palace itself seems to mourn, its walls heavy with the weight of things unsaid and unsmelled. You slip into the queen's private chambers, now eerily still. The shelves are half empty, the jars of precious oil gone, the air thick with the ghost of a scent that once ruled empires. You find a scrap of papyrus on the floor, its ink smudged, the writing hurried and cryptic. Lotus at dawn, myrrh in shadow, seal with gold. You try to piece together the meaning, but it's like chasing smoke through your fingers. You realize that even if you found every ingredient, every step, something essential would still be missing. The spirit, the ritual, the queen herself. Quirky tidbit. Some say that Cleopatra, foreseeing her own downfall, ordered her perfumers to destroy their notes, and scatter the ingredients to the winds. Others whisper that a handful of loyal servants escaped with the recipe, vowing to keep it safe until Egypt rose again. There are even tales of secret societies, descendants of the queen's perfumers, who meet in hidden chambers to mix oils by moonlight, keeping the legend alive with every drop. Imagine a candlelit room, somewhere in the back streets of Alexandria, where the descendants of those ancient artisans still gather, passing down a single vial of precious oil from hand to hand, each generation adding their own twist to the legend. You wander the palace one last time, the halls echoing with the footsteps of the past. You imagine the Roman soldiers searching every room, overturning jars, unrolling scrolls, sniffing at every bottle in the hope of finding the queen's legendary scent. But all they find are shadows and rumors, the real secret already vanished into legend. You can almost picture the frustration on the faces of the Roman officers, so close to the greatest treasure of all, yet unable to grasp it, like trying to catch the scent of a flower on the wind. Historians still argue whether the recipe was deliberately erased or simply lost in the chaos of conquest. Some believe the Romans tried to force the secret from Cleopatra's perfumers, but the true formula was never written down in full, only whispered from master to apprentice, generation after generation. Others suggest that the recipe was hidden in plain sight, disguised as a prayer or a poem, waiting for someone clever enough to decode it. There are even fringe theories that the recipe was encoded in the very architecture of the palace itself, with each column and frieze representing a different ingredient or step in the process. You pause at a window overlooking the Nile, the river dark and silent under the stars. The city below is hushed, as if holding its breath, waiting to see what the dawn will bring. You realize that the disappearance of Cleopatra's perfume isn't just the loss of a recipe. It's the loss of a world, a way of life, a belief in the power of scent to shape destiny. Historians still debate whether the secret will ever be found, or if it's better left as a mystery, a story to be told and retold as long as the lotus blooms. Quirky tidbit. In the centuries that followed, Treasure hunters and scholars scoured the ruins of Alexandria, convinced that Cleopatra's lost perfume was buried somewhere beneath the city. Some claimed to find fragments of ancient jars, still faintly fragrant after 1,000 years. Others insisted that the scent of lotus would sometimes drift through the ruins at night, as if the queen herself were still walking the halls, daring anyone to follow her trail. There are even stories of modern archaeologists who, while excavating the ancient city, have caught a sudden, inexplicable whiff of lotus and myrrh, only for it to vanish as quickly as it appeared. You slip away from the palace, the first hints of dawn on the horizon, and promise yourself that if you ever catch a whiff of that legendary scent, you'll remember this night, the night when history, legend, and perfume became one. The city is quieter now, the Nile reflecting the pale light of morning, and you realize that some mysteries are meant to linger, like a fragrance that refuses to fade. You walk along the riverbank, the air cool and fresh, and vow that, should you ever stumble upon even a hint of Cleopatra's elusive recipe, you'll guard it as fiercely as the queen herself. You emerge from the palace into the bright, modern bustle of Alexandria's streets, the ancient city layered beneath your feet, its secrets waiting beneath centuries of dust and stone. The world has changed, but the legend of Cleopatra's perfume lingers, stubborn as the scent of lotus in a closed room. You cross a busy square where taxis honk and vendors hawk coffee, but your destination is quieter, a small archaeological dig tucked behind a crumbling wall, where a handful of researchers are hunched over the earth, chasing whispers of the past. You slip under a striped awning and find yourself among crates of pottery shards, broken amphorae, and the unmistakable tang of history in the air. A young archaeologist greets you, her hands stained with red clay. "Looking for lost queens?" she jokes, brushing dust from a fragment of alabaster. You grin, but your heart beats a little faster as she leads you to a table crowded with relics. Tiny jars, some still sealed with ancient wax, and a pile of faded papyrus fragments. "We think this was a perfumer's workshop," she says, her voice low with reverence. "Maybe even royal." Mainstream historical fact: in the last few decades, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of ancient Egyptian perfume factories, complete with mixing bowls, storage jars, and residues still clinging to the insides. In 2012, a team near Thmuis, modern Tel Al-Tamai, unearthed what they believe to be one of Cleopatra's own perfume labs. Using chemical analysis, scientists identified traces of myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus, ingredients that match the legends almost exactly. For the first time in centuries, the possibility of recreating the queen's signature scent became tantalizingly real. You watch as the archaeologist carefully opens a tiny jar, its seal cracked but still intact. The room leans in, everyone holding their breath. She dips a slender tool inside and lifts out a crumb of dark, waxy residue. "We're sending this to the lab," she says. "But go ahead, take a sniff." You do, and the scent is faint but unmistakable, floral, spicy, with a haunting sweetness that makes your head swim. It's as if Cleopatra herself has reached through time, offering you a glimpse of her world in a single breath. Quirky tidbit: some modern perfumers, inspired by these discoveries, have tried to resurrect Cleopatra's lost fragrance using ancient recipes and the latest technology. They blend oils and resins by hand, steeping petals in olive oil for weeks, just as the Egyptians did. The results are mixed. Some scents are lush and intoxicating, others a bit too archaeological for modern tastes. One perfumer described his recreation as like walking into a temple at dawn, with incense still smoldering and the river breeze in your hair. Not exactly Sephora, but definitely unforgettable. You move to a workbench where a chemist is examining a sample under a microscope. She explains how gas chromatography can identify the molecular fingerprints of ancient oils, separating each note like a musical chord. It's detective work, she says, but with your nose. She shows you a chart, peaks and valleys mapping the scent's journey from lotus to myrrh to cinnamon, each spike a clue in the centuries-old mystery. Historians still argue whether these scientific reconstructions can ever truly capture the magic of Cleopatra's original blend. Some say the ingredients are only part of the story, that the rituals, the setting, even the queen's own presence, added layers of meaning that no lab can reproduce. Others believe that, with enough patience and technology, we might one day hold a vial of perfume that smells exactly as it did on Cleopatra's skin. You step outside, the modern city swirling around you, and close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine the ancient harbor alive with ships, the air thick with the scent of lotus and spice, the queen herself gliding past in a cloud of perfume. You realize that the search for Cleopatra's fragrance isn't just about chemistry or archaeology. It's about longing, about the human desire to touch the past, to bring a lost world back to life with a single breath. Quirky tidbit. Some enthusiasts have gone so far as to plant ancient varieties of lotus and other perfume ingredients in Egyptian gardens, hoping to grow the exact flowers Cleopatra's perfumers once used. There are even perfume pilgrimages, where travelers follow the trail of ancient scent from temple to tomb, sniffing every blossom along the way. If you ever get the chance, pack your best sandals. Just watch out for the occasional crocodile. You wander the dig site as the sun sets, the city's ancient and modern layers blending in the golden light. You realize that, for all our science and ambition, some mysteries will always remain just out of reach. Historians still debate whether we'll ever truly rediscover Cleopatra's perfume, or if it's destined to remain a legend, part memory, part myth, part dream. As you leave, you catch one last whiff of lotus on the breeze and smile. The queen's scent may be lost, but her story lingers, as potent and irresistible as ever. And who knows? Maybe, somewhere in the ruins, a single drop of her perfume still waits, ready to enchant the next dreamer bold enough to follow the trail. You linger at the edge of the dig site, letting the city's modern bustle fade behind you, and your thoughts drift to how Cleopatra's legend has managed to seep into every corner of the world, even thousands of years after her reign. It's not just the marble statues or the hieroglyphs etched into museum glass. It's the way people everywhere still chase the idea of her, especially her perfume. You can't help but notice how her story has been bottled and branded, from Queen of the Nile body sprays in drugstores to luxury perfumes with lotus and myrrh notes, promising a brush with royalty. Even scrolling through your feed, you spot ads for Cleopatra's Secret, serums and Lotus Empress, candles, each one claiming to capture a hint of her lost allure. You duck into a shaded cafe, the air swirling with coffee and cardamom, and watch as a young couple at the next table giggles over a tiny perfume sample. The woman dabs some on her wrist and waves it under her friend's nose, joking that it's supposed to make her irresistible. You think about how, in ancient Egypt, fragrance was more than just a finishing touch. It was a statement, a shield, and sometimes a weapon. Cleopatra knew this better than anyone. Her scent wasn't just for seduction. It was her signature, her calling card, her silent ambassador at every feast and negotiation. It's wild to realize that the basic idea behind perfume hasn't changed much since Cleopatra's time. Back then, the right fragrance could signal power or piety, mark you as a priest or a queen, or even serve as a passport to the afterlife. Today, perfume is a billion-dollar industry, with brands and celebrities vying to bottle the next myth. The formulas are different, synthetic musks and aldehydes instead of lotus and cinnamon. But the dream is the same, to capture a feeling, a memory, a bit of magic, and carry it with you wherever you go. You overhear a story from a modern perfumer in the cafe, a self-described nose, who once tried to recreate an ancient scent using only ingredients Cleopatra's perfumers would have had. It was a disaster at first. He laughs, describing the blend as like wet papyrus and overripe figs left in the sun. But then, he added a drop of blue lotus oil, and the mixture came alive. It wasn't Cleopatra's perfume, not really. But it made me believe in the legend all over again. You smile, reminded that sometimes the magic is less about the recipe and more about the risk, the imagination, and the willingness to chase a dream that might never be caught. Wandering through a nearby market, you pass stalls overflowing with spices, flowers, and glass bottles in every color. A vendor offers you a sniff of something he calls Pharaoh's secret. It's sweet, smoky, and just a little wild. You realize the Queen's story has become a playground for creativity, a challenge for every perfumer who wants to leave their mark. Some even say that wearing a scent inspired by Cleopatra can change your luck, attract admirers, or help you channel your inner ruler. The power of suggestion is strong. Sometimes, just believing you're wearing something legendary is enough to make you walk a little taller, speak a little more boldly, or smile at a stranger you might otherwise have ignored. Of course, not everyone buys into the hype. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's perfume was truly unique, or whether her charisma and the rituals around her made even the simplest blend unforgettable. Some scholars argue that this secret was less about ingredients and more about performance. The midnight mixing, the temple blessings, the Queen's own flair for drama. Others insist that the recipe itself, lost to time, held the real magic, and that modern recreations can only ever be pale imitations. You pause by a fountain, the air misty with the scent of jasmine and orange blossom, and realize that Cleopatra's influence is everywhere. It's in the way people talk about perfume, in the rituals of getting ready for a big night, in the hope that a single drop can make you unforgettable. The Queen may be gone, but her legend lingers, on the skin, in the air, in the dreams of everyone who's ever wished for a little more magic in their lives. A little girl skips by, trailing the scent of her mother's perfume, and you wonder if she's dreaming of being a queen, or an explorer, or just someone who leaves a mark on the world. The power of scent, after all, is that it connects us, to history, to each other, to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we want to be. There's even a rumor in the world of high-end fragrance, a whisper that somewhere, someone has finally cracked the code, recreated the lost perfume, and bottled the essence of Cleopatra herself. Some say it's locked away in a vault, others that it's been worn by royalty at secret galas. The truth, as always, is elusive. Maybe the real secret is that the search never ends, that every new perfume is another attempt to capture the queen's spirit, to make the past live again with a single breath. As the sun sets over Alexandria, you take a deep breath, the city's scents swirling around you. The past is never really gone, not as long as someone remembers, someone believes, someone dares to chase the fragrance of a legend. And tonight you realize you're part of that story too. You wander through Alexandria's twilight, the city's ancient and modern layers blending like the notes in a complicated perfume. The question lingers in your mind, what if Rome had succeeded? What if, in some alternate timeline, a clever Roman perfumer had finally cracked Cleopatra's code, deciphered the cryptic notes, sourced the rarest ingredients, and managed to bottle the queen's magic for the empire? You imagine the scene, a triumphant senator unveiling a vial of Regina Aegypti, at a lavish feast, the scent drifting through marble halls, the guests murmuring in awe as the perfume of Egypt's last pharaoh becomes the talk of the city. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. The Romans were relentless in their pursuit of luxury, and scent was no exception. They imported barrels of Egyptian oils, built their own perfume factories, and even tried to hire away the best noses from Alexandria. If they'd managed to capture Cleopatra's signature blend, it would have been the ultimate status symbol, worn by empresses, splashed on the togas of generals, maybe even used to scent the very walls of the Senate. Imagine the power struggles, the whispered accusations of who had the real formula, the black market for counterfeit blends. The perfume arms race would have gone into overdrive. You picture Roman society transformed by this olfactory coup. The city's bathhouses, already famous for their clouds of steam and chatter, would be thick with the scent of lotus and myrrh. Gladiators might dab a drop behind each ear before stepping into the arena, hoping for a whiff of luck or courage. Poets would write odes to the fragrance, lovers would exchange scented notes, and ambitious matrons would scheme to outdo each other at every gathering. The perfume would become a kind of social currency, a way to climb the ranks or cement alliances. You could almost hear the street vendors hawking, "Authentic Alexandrian essence, guaranteed to seduce or your money back." Some things never change. But would the magic have lasted? You wonder if the very act of copying the perfume would have stripped it of its power. Part of Cleopatra's allure was her mystery, her ability to turn even the simplest ritual into a legend. Once the recipe became just another commodity, would it still have enchanted the world? Historians still debate whether the Romans' obsession with Egyptian luxury was admiration or envy, and whether their attempts to imitate Cleopatra's style ever truly succeeded. Some scholars argue that the queen's genius lay not just in her ingredients, but in the way she wove story, ritual, and charisma into every drop. Others believe that, had Rome succeeded, the perfume might have changed the course of fashion, politics, even romance itself. There's a quirky theory that, if Rome had bottled Cleopatra's scent, the entire history of Western perfumery would have shifted. Instead of the heavy, musky blends that dominated for centuries, maybe the world would have embraced lighter, floral, and more exotic notes. Imagine Parisian perfumers in the Middle Ages, working by candlelight with lotus and cinnamon instead of rose and ambergris. Maybe the perfume would have traveled along trade routes, inspiring new blends in India, China, or even the distant Spice Islands. The scent of Cleopatra could have become a global phenomenon, an ancient Chanel No. 5, passed from hand to hand, century after century. You let your mind wander further. What if the perfume had become a symbol of peace, rather than conquest? Maybe a Roman empress, wearing Cleopatra's blend, would have used it to broker alliances, to soften the edges of hard negotiations, to remind the world that beauty and power could coexist. Or maybe the perfume would have become a forbidden treasure, hoarded by the elite, its recipe guarded as fiercely as any military secret. There's a certain irony in imagining the empire that conquered Egypt still chasing the ghost of its queen, never quite able to capture the essence of what made her unforgettable. As you stroll past a bakery, the scent of fresh bread mingles with the night air, and you realize that every culture, every era, has its own signature smells, its own way of remembering and reinventing the past. The perfume of Cleopatra, had it survived, might have changed the very language of scent, the way people spoke of love and longing, the rituals of daily life. Historians still argue whether a single fragrance could really alter the course of history. But you know that stories have power, and sometimes, a legend is enough to shape the world. You pause at the edge of the harbor, watching the moon ripple across the water, and imagine a world where Cleopatra's perfume is not just a memory, but a living presence, worn by rulers and rebels, whispered about in marketplaces, inspiring poets and dreamers for generations. Maybe, in some parallel universe, the scent of lotus and honey still drifts through the streets of Rome, a reminder that even the greatest empires are shaped by the mysteries they cannot possess. You take a deep breath, letting the night air fill your lungs, and smile. The real magic, you realize, is not in the bottle, but in the longing, the endless search for something beautiful, mysterious, and just out of reach. You wander back through Alexandria's ancient streets, the city hushed beneath a velvet sky, and find yourself drawn toward the ruins where the palace once stood. The stones are cool beneath your feet, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps and the slow, patient work of time. You pause at a broken column, its surface etched with faded lotus petals, and close your eyes, letting the night air fill your lungs. There's a whisper of jasmine on the breeze, a hint of something sweet and elusive. Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe, just maybe, it's the last lingering note of Cleopatra's lost perfume. You picture the queen herself, gliding through these halls in the glow of torchlight, her scent swirling around her like a living memory. The world has changed, empires have risen and fallen, but her legend remains, woven into the stones, the river, the very air. You imagine the palace as it once was, marble floors gleaming, fountains bubbling, the air heavy with the fragrance of lotus, honey, and spice. Servants move quietly through the corridors, carrying trays of scented oil and garlands of fresh flowers. Somewhere, in a candlelit chamber, Cleopatra is mixing her latest blend, her laughter echoing down the halls. The city around you is quiet now, but you can almost hear the distant sounds of a banquet, the clink of goblets, the low hum of conversation, the soft rustle of silk. You wonder how many lives were changed by a single whiff of the queen's perfume, how many hearts were won or lost, how many secrets were whispered in the scented shadows. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's fragrance was truly unique, or if its power lay in the stories people told about it. Some say the recipe was lost forever, others believe it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for a dreamer bold enough to find it. You kneel beside a patch of wild lotus, the petals glowing pale in the moonlight, and think of all the hands that have reached for this flower, priests, perfumers, lovers, and thieves. each one hoping to bottle a little bit of magic, to capture a piece of the queen's legend for themselves. You smile, knowing that the real secret isn't in the recipe, but in the longing, the hope that a single scent can change everything, if only for a moment. There's a quiet comfort in knowing that some mysteries endure, that not every secret needs to be solved. The ruins of Alexandria are full of stories, some written in stone, others carried on the wind. You rise, brushing dust from your hands, and take one last look at the city. The Nile glimmers in the distance, its waters reflecting the stars, and you realize that the scent of Cleopatra, real or imagined, will always linger here, woven into the fabric of the night. As you walk away, the breeze shifts, carrying with it a trace of something ancient and wild. You pause, breathing it in, and feel a connection to all those who have come before you, those who searched, who dreamed, who believed in the power of a single, perfect fragrance. The story of Cleopatra's perfume isn't just about what was lost, it's about what endures. The legend, the longing, the promise that somewhere, just out of reach, a little magic still waits. You slip into the shadows, the city quiet behind you, and let the memory of lotus and honey guide you home. The night is gentle, the world at peace, and for a moment, you are part of something timeless, a story that began in a queen's midnight laboratory and will never truly end. Now, as you settle in, let your breath slow and your thoughts drift like the Nile under the moon. The last notes of lotus and honey fade softly in the air, lingering just long enough to remind you that some mysteries are meant to comfort, not confound. The city of Alexandria grows quieter with each heartbeat, its ancient stones warmed by memory and gentle dreams. Imagine the queen herself, her laughter echoing in the distance, her scent a gentle promise that you are safe, that you are home. Let the world outside your window fall away, replaced by the hush of river reeds and the soft glow of candlelight. The story of Cleopatra's perfume, with all its secrets and wonders, settles around you like a silken shawl. There is nothing you need to do now but breathe, and rest, and let the legend carry you into sleep. The perfume of the past is gentle, soothing, and eternal, just like the dreams waiting for you tonight. Good night, and may your dreams be as sweet and mysterious as the scent of a queen.